You're listening to episode 788 of a VerySpatial podcast, July 7th, 2026.
Hello and welcome to our VerySpatial podcast. I'm Jesse.
I'm Sue.
I'm Barb.
And this is Frank.
And this week we're going to be talking about newses. A few different news.
First up, a kind of interesting Supreme Court case that went through. The Supreme Court has ruled, not universally though, but they ruled a 6-3 majority that your location data is in fact protected under the Fourth Amendment. In the United States, for those of you who aren't in the United States, the Fourth Amendment protects us from illegal searches and seizures, among a couple other things. And what has happened in the past, it's been, I don't want to say routine, but not unusual for the police so they observe that you're in an area and they just kind of do a sweeping, give us all the location-based information on a particular cell phone, or in many cases, all the cell phones in this particular time frame, in this particular geo-fenced area. And they sort of look through it and they go, yeah, we use that to prove that you are in fact were there during the crime time and therefore you could be a suspect. That's oversimplifying things dramatically. But what the Supreme Court ruled in a particular case of all the news reports of a bank robbery, technically it was a credit union robbery, that no, in fact, you cannot use location data. It's an illegal search if you do that. The logic being, the thing I think was really interesting, and I think it was Justice Brown that put the majority opinion in. The thing I thought was really interesting is they said that basically using the cell phone like you're supposed to be using it does not mean you automatically surrender your reasonable rights to privacy. And they consider location information to be just part of doing cell phone stuff. So it's kind of an important and momentous case, I think.
And it's not the first one. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember the older ones we've talked about before on the podcast where these type of things have been ruled on in lower courts. But it is nice to see that, there continues to be this consideration of location privacy, just as, of course, we have the flip of that, yes, it should be private from search and seizure, but of course, all of our phone companies and things like that are selling our data, our derivatives of our data, for their own, betterment of their pockets, I guess. But
financial gain.
Yeah, there we go. Sure. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 that we know that's still going on, and those things are, they've been contested, but I think right now in our current administration, there's a lot of pushback. In the EU, there's a lot more protections for consumers in terms of their privacy and expectations of what can happen with your data through your carrier and those type of things. So it's just kind of it is a national/regional type of conversation.
And I think we're going to see that play out even more in different areas as technology is changing, right? A lot more data collection is coming from places that we wouldn't necessarily think about it. So, for example, not to get into it now, but there's been some recent questions about some of the data collected, for example, by things like self-driving cars and stuff like that, and their capabilities, or Waymo and things like that. So we may see other cases relating to how data is used coming up in the future.
I think the really interesting bit here is the essential logic that the government tried to use in this case was, okay, you voluntarily gave this information to, in this case, Google, I think it was, but whoever, Apple or Google or AT&T,
Verizon,
whatever it is, you chose to do this. And we asked them for that information and they chose to give that information. And there's nothing you can do about it because you voluntarily gave it to them. I think it's really important and fascinating here that they actually ruled, no, actually, the fact that you chose to share them with the company doesn't mean that you surrender all your rights to that information or your privacy by doing that. I think that's going to be a really interesting precedent moving forward, just beyond geofence location data.
And, those companies that are pushing for privacy, they're getting a lot of pushback from governments. And, we can name various companies that say these things, and we can also name the exact opposite of what they're doing to counter what they're saying they're hoping to do. But yeah, it's definitely a long-term question mark of, well, I guess, did I give it's the VGI, right? Did we volunteer that geographic information? I think the
Right.
argument clearly has been and continues to be, no, it's not volunteered. It is involuntary, even though the company can derive that from their data sets. Doesn't mean that we've given them the say so that they can, other than we had to sign a contract to be able to use the service.
For me, what's interesting isn't just, the location-based data, it's how much these devices have become an extension of who we are, almost like a mobile home base that we're taking with us. This wouldn't have been a question if we didn't have the ubiquity of cell phones. Almost expected that everyone will have one and will carry one. And, like Sue was saying, by extension, things even like smartwatches and stuff.
Next up in the news, some excitement for those of you who enjoy the museum experience. National Geographic, after lots of work and lots of renovation, has actually opened their Museum of Exploration in Washington, D.C. So the National Geographic Society, of course, a venerable organization that has always promoted geography and nature in the world and through its amazing magazine over the years and all kinds of initiatives. So, pretty exciting. Construction has been ongoing since 2022 to expand the building that was the previous museum. And now there's lots of new exhibits, new technology, all kinds of things. So pretty exciting. So, if you are going to be in DC and we've got some time, I think this would be a really cool visit to make.
And while you're there in DC, you can go over to the Smithsonian and check out this, I think would be amazingly cool thing to check out, which is the Smithsonian Smithsonian Starstruck, an immersive experience. So what this is allows you to walk among and see the stars via VR, which is just kind of cool. It does cost money. That be aware there. It's a 40-minute astronomy walk. It's about $30 to $35 less if you get a group together. But I'm betting there's a line. And so while you're waiting for your ticket time to come up at the Smithsonian, you could head over to the National Geographic Explorer Museum and check that out. That'd be a great double feature in the DC.
Yeah, that would be a
area.
cool day.
Yeah.
I have to say, one of my favorite field trips back when we were kids, and I grew up in upstate New York, is we got to go to the planetarium up in Rochester. It's one of those planetarium shows, and it is so amazing. And, this is kind of the next gen sort of version of some of that, but they can do so much more now with technologies like VR. So I always had a kind of soft spot for those types of things. And this is another that will be on my bucket list if I make it up that way.
And I know that for the National Geographic Museum, everyone's going to want to go and get their picture taken. They've got basically a big monument, a big statue that looks like the National Geographic yellow square that you can
The cover of the
the
magazine.
cover magazine you can stand in front of, along with a lot of very fun-looking exhibits that tie in with a lot of the researchers and conservationists who have been doing work over the past few decades, like the photo arc for portraits of animals where the species might be lost.
Can I just say that? Go ahead. Can I just say that although we lived there for a couple 3 years, Barbara and I did, and I really didn't enjoy the experience of living there. DC is, if you haven't been, it's definitely should be on your bucket list, if for nothing else than the museums themselves. There's an amazing amount of free, for the most part, or really cheap experiences you can have there in a very, very small, I don't know,
Yeah.
half-mile area. So it's easy to get to and walk around and stuff like that. And there's a metro stop right there in the mall, so you can just go and do all the things. Obviously, you wouldn't want to pick something like the 4th of July or whatever when it's really, really busy. But when you're after that period, it's just an amazing city to really explore, not just American history, which obviously there's a lot there, but there's a lot of world history and natural history and space history that you can look at. And so it's really worth your time if you don't have it on your bucket list.
Yeah, I mean, world-class museums and objects and exhibits and just over the years, amazing professionals that have worked at all of these museums, art, history, the natural world, anything. And, really, really important museums too, like the Holocaust Museum and things like that are are there as well.
My suggestion is to take the train to the National Zoo and make sure that you take somebody who doesn't like escalators and then go up and up and up and up and just watch them, because that's amusement of its own.
Yeah, that's right. That's another
tortuous, but
really important.
Yeah.
A really important.
the zoo though, the zoo, not the escalator.
Yeah, no, the zoo out in what was it?
Oh,
Woodley
the
Park,
escalator
is
is
at the
fun too.
top.
I did that for a while commuting, and it's enjoyable in its own way.
So, but let me also tell you that every metro station will be relatively happy to tell you this. Find out if it's working before you do that. Ask me how I know.
Yeah.
It's not near as much fun when the escalator is broken.
Yes. It's a lot of steps.
No food.
Okay, so go to DC, I guess. In fact, you can do that next February, March for the various user conferences in the area. And speaking of user thingies, ArcGIS Online, of course, updated with its every 4-month update-ish or 4-month-ish update in June. And there are a lot of changes, and a few things have gone away. More things have been added and expanded. And we will just leave the link in the show notes for you to go and look for the maps, the apps, the scenes, all the things that, you might want to look at, because it's just too long of a list nowadays to really talk about in detail.
I was thinking about this when I was looking at this, preparing for the podcast, looking at the list. I was like, okay, blah, 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 blah. That's what I felt like I was reading as I was going down the list. And I was realizing that all these fixes, and this is not unique to ARC in any way, shape, or form. It's just sort of the modern world we live in, that you get these incremental changes that you kind of lose track of what's going on or what's changing, or where things are that used to be there that aren't there, or what's this button now do this is there. And it's a very different enterprise-based world we live in that regard, because if you're older like us, you're used to like big hunks of stuff coming. Even in video games, you'll sometimes get big packs of updates or something like that. This sort of incremental 4-month change is great for bug fixes, but it makes it really hard to keep track of the product in a lot of ways.
Okay. And that'll probably be something we talk about in the next episode in our main topic. So come back for that. Did you have something you want to add before we move on? Yeah. Then the next news item is just to highlight climate.us. This is an attempt to take a lot of the climate materials that were available on climate.gov and make them available through another source, since a lot of those materials had been either frozen or no longer available. So if you want to go and check that out, it's not like the US is the only region, country, organization that is doing climate research. So keep in mind, there's lots of other sources around the world that provide data, provide recent news, provide updates on climate knowledge and action as well.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that the United States has always been a bit of not always, but a reasonably large percentage of the time been a really good source for data, just reliable data, and do what you will with it. And that's a little bit of a loaded statement, but it is comparatively been a good source. It's not so much now, which is a very sad thing for a lot of us in the United States. And to some extent, I'm wondering if this isn't going to be a decent evolution, where you've got a site that develops its own trustworthiness. Because the very first thing they say is that Climate US launches independent website for trusted climate information, right? So 2 big words there, independent and trusted. That's kind of what I feel like we may be moving to as a ecosystem, is these sort of independent entities that say, we've vetted this information, we can give you the source, we can give you reliable metadata, so you can be comfortable that what you're getting is good data and usable within the context of whatever the metadata tells you it can be used.
Yeah, it comes back around to that idea of the authoritative, right? And who can we point to as an authoritative source? And we're still in that era of misinformation where people will come back and say, well, this isn't an authoritative source. We're not going to trust the data here. And that's They said that about various US sites as well. So and other sites. And so it's a long-term question mark of how we're going to deal with. I'm going to take all this out because talking about science deniers is just not worth it. Never mind. Taking it out. Gone. Poof. Yes, Lily, I'm aware that you want me to pay attention to you. And that you're now stuck on my pants. Ow. May I? Thank you. Why are you going to make holes in my pants?
Everybody needs a hobby.
It is one of hers. I don't know. What else can we say about it other than science deniers?
Oh, no, we can say that, it's amazing how quickly this was able to come together with the efforts of the scientific community. And because they know what they're doing, they've worked on it for most of their research lives, they envisioned this and were able to bring it together so that there wasn't as big a gap for anyone that needs this for the work that they're doing, especially for people on the ground that are doing work that rely on it.
And as an example of another set of tools that can be used for climate research, weather, MWF. So for those of you who don't know, when you hear Euromodel in weather forecasting, it's coming from ECMWF, which is the European Center for Mid-Range, maybe it's medium range, but mid-range weather forecasting. And they are a group that has been working for a long time in this area, right? Collecting and processing and analyzing and visualizing weather data and climate data. And so they have recently released EarthKit 1.0. So essentially, this is a suite of tools, Python tools, so open source Python ecosystem, and it has modules for working with geospatial data for data processing itself, visualization. I think they've got a hydro module as well. So it's an example of a set of tools that you can get and utilize along with accompanying data, right, to work on problems related to weather, weather understanding and climate. So if you're interested, you can follow the link to get to it. This is part of kind of a 5-year plan that ECMWF and some of their partners have to build these tool sets. So kind of a roadmap from 23 to 27. So they've been working on EarthKit. Now they're confident in it. So it's reached a 1.0 release. And so if you want more information or you want to download and work with it, you can follow the link in the show notes to the news article, and they've got a lot of information about it.
And I think one of the key things that they did when developing this is to make sure that it is interoperable and, publicly visible coded. So they put a lot of effort in it being as widely usable as possible.
Yeah. You want me to do it or you want to do it? Oh. Next up, this news article was actually mid-June, but kind of interesting that a group called the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks, or SPUN, has produced the first global map of mycorrhizal fungi, which are apparently connected under the ground fungi. And I'm not as familiar with this, but they're actually underground networks. This very Last of Us kind of esque, but they're underground networks of fungi that have an impact on what's going on the surface as well. So they help sustain plant life and they help regulate climate by drawing carbon into the soils. So the study was recently published in Science, which is why they're talking about it now. But the interactive visualization is really cool, and you can follow a link in the show notes to get to it. But first of all, I had not heard of this before. And second of all, there's a group that is working hard on understanding and protecting these underground fungi networks. So that's pretty cool.
I also have not heard of this before this, and it sort of makes sense in a way, given what we know about what fungi do on the surface, that underground they would have a prominent impact on things like carbon sequestration within natural carbon sequestration within soils and things like that. But the network is estimated to be 110 quadrillion kilometers. I mean, that's just one of those numbers is just wrapping your brain around is functionally impossible. But to think that there's that much fungi underground in these networks is just It's amazing. It blows my mind. It's something I would never even conceive of being true.
And isn't that really the power of that visualization and mapping? Because the executive director of SPUN, Dr. Toby Kears, who's an evolutionary biologist, said that fungi have been ignored in climate and conservation because if you don't know it, you don't know it. And now's the time for a trajectory change. And this isn't just something with mapping, it also requires a lot of literally hands-on field work to get this information.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't believe it when they said that approximately 70% of plant species on Earth are involved in this network where the fungi are providing nutrients and water to the plants in exchange for the carbon that they're producing. Like, it's amazing. Yeah, every week, every day, we learn something more about how the Earth works. And this is one of the biggest ones that I've found in a while. I just had no idea.
So for those of you out there who are Star Trek Discovery fans and are contemplating the mycelial network and like, what's the difference between mycelial networks and, I shouldn't have done this, mycorrhizal networks. The mycelium network is the physical structure of the fungi, whereas the mycorrhizal, yeah, that's right, is, as this is telling me, this is the second or third source I found on it, and they're all saying the same thing. So I'm not enough research, but it says that it's the symbiotic relationship between certain fungi and plant roots. So it's the relationship between the fungi and the surroundings. So things
categorizing them by the relationship.
Yeah, so it's more about the relationship as opposed to the physical object, even though it's made up of the physical objects as well. So that would be the difference between the mycelial network and the mycorrhizal network. And again, that's from a non-biologist who's quickly looked on 3 sites just to make sure that they all kind of agreed. But there you go.
But check it out because it's pretty cool visualization for sure.
It's another thing that just makes me realize I don't understand dirt like at all.
It's not about the dirt. This exists in dirt, but it's not the dirt.
I know, but I'm just, all that underground crap. It's just like, I don't know what any of this, I get it. It's just, this news item disturbs me for 2 reasons. All right. First of all, it's been a long time since I've had a news item that so succinctly highlights my utter ignorance of something, that just complete and utter ignorance. And the second is that now that's another thing I have to worry about at night if I'm worrying about, climate change and all that stuff. So this is an amazing news item.
Which we brought in at least 2, if not more, pop culture references. How many? We only did Last of Us and Star Trek?
Yeah, we only did Last of Us and Star Trek.
There's got to be more that we can do. And I didn't, I really wanted to, whenever we were doing the dirt thing, I wanted to take the deep dive into the soil where it's all soil.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that, so.
And also, I mean, these guys are amazing with names. Spun for their network and Underground Atlas, right?
Yeah.
It's just, like, for the win.
So here's the third, right? So I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3 again with my friends, and there's a part in the Underdark where you deal with animated fungi. And we just hit that part like 2 days ago.
These are the good guys, though. That's how you have to think of it.
Yeah.
Sentinel 1A from the Copernicus Sentinel missions has completed its operational mission. I think it was originally supposed to be a 7-year, but it's been operating for more than 12 years. So another example of an amazing scientific remote sensing mission that went well beyond its planned lifetime. So it launched back in April 2014. And it was the first satellite of the Copernicus Sentinel missions. It's one of the radar satellites, so the way they're numbered. So the 1 series are radar satellites. And B, I think, failed a number of years ago. I forget when. But 1C and 1D are still up there, and they are working in tandem to still get us that reliable radar data. So they have ended the mission for Sentinel 1A, but a lot more exciting stuff coming from the overall Copernicus program, though. So I guess a round of applause for Sentinel 1A and a job well done.
And Sentinel 3C is scheduled for launch in autumn to continue on with the land monitoring and ocean monitoring.
So 2 is optical, 3 is water ice. What is 5? Because I just saw 5.
So wasn't 5 aerosols and atmospheric stuff?
And then 4? Anybody remember 4?
No, I can't remember 4.
And of course, I'm too lazy.
I feel like we need a chart.
It is a chart kind of sitch.
I'll know these
Yeah.
things in September whenever it's time for me to teach it again. But
Right.
right now, it's just kind of like there's too much.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's also like what
Yeah,
data you
it's
use, right? Because I went right to the 2B data, and that's the only
Yeah.
all I've ever really used. So,
Well, no, you use whenever you're doing the water delineation for flooding, you were using the SRT, not
I
SRT.
did use SAR data
the
for that. I used a
SAR.
couple different. So that's fair. I did.
Google Earth Pro, a desktop application that many of us have used for a couple of decades now, is it? Well, no, you've got a year ish, but on what is it, June 25th, 2027, downloads for Google Earth Pro will no longer be available. Web and mobile versions will still be available, but if you do want the installers for Google Earth Pro to have a desktop version, the services will keep running, but you will need to have the download before that. Of course, we live in the world of the web. Someone will have the archived version of Google Earth Pro installer out there. But if you want to get it from Google, don't forget to do that.
There's also, I saw on Reddit of all places, somebody talked about a subscription cost that either exists, is going to exist, or replace Google Earth Pro. I didn't have time before we recorded this to dig into it, but presumably you could buy it. And I don't know if it's a desktop client or what.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, so I think they're moving towards. I think I get the impression they're recognizing a couple things. One, that Google Earth Pro is a viable GIS for a lot of people. At least they believe so. Certainly up for debate, and that things like ArcGIS Online have a lot more utility now. So
I think maybe. Well, I mean, one, of course, Pro has been online for a decade now, if not more. But maybe they're pushing people because of the term Pro. Maybe pushing people more to Google Earth Engine, which I don't think is going away, and trying to just deprecating the Pro idea to get people on that. And of course, the less you build things for desktop, the more people are on the web and will go to Google to do searches. So, like,
right. And on top of that, of course, the increased inclusion of ads within things like Google Earth or Google Maps, that probably doesn't hurt the revenue stream at all either.
Yeah.
So, obviously you're going to need an internet connection for desktop for the data to show up, but I can see where the mobile would be a little more. That's what I'm looking for here. The word I want to use is exploitable, but that seems I don't want to put too harsh a label on it, but basically make it easier for them to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to deliver content to you that they can then charge those who develop said content. And that whole ecosystem that makes Google as stupid big as they are.
yes.
And this is going to impact organizations that do a lot of their, work with this offline. So they're going to have to start making preparations now. Like you said, you have a year.
And if you are using Google Earth Pro as essentially as a lightweight GIS, definitely look at things like QGIS and some of the other online open source projects to take advantage of those. So yeah. Any last minute newses? No? Okay. Well, we don't have anything in the events corner because we're lazy and it's summer and it's hot. So we'll just go on to the web corner and that'll be our wrap up for the
All right. This week's web corner is a little fun game. So I don't play Wordle, but I'm told it's like Wordle and GeoGuessr basically had a baby. It's called MapTap. You follow the link, and basically you get 5 questions per day. And what you have to do is essentially place the location of cities around the world. And they give you a little test with New York City first. And here's my advice. Make sure you're zoomed in enough because it really helps, right? Because they're cities, you can look for urban areas. I scored pretty good. I got a 983, I think, today. So anyway, it's kind of in that vein. And coming up on the next episode, we might have another one that's kind of like this with a different topic. But that's kind of fun. Doesn't take you very long. You can share your scores if you want. So check it out. MapTap.
I will not share my score because I'm learned a very good phrase from my good friend, Dr. Jesse Rouse, who told me that he and also I am a geographer, not an atlas. So I don't tend to do very well in these things.
But you get practice. You get practice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I've all the ones you've been sending me. I'm looking forward to this. It's really neat to see all the creativity going into these sort of games
Yeah,
now.
there's like a rash of them that have been coming out recently. So yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, if you'd like us to add an event to the podcast, because, again, no events, send us an email to podcast@veryspatial.com.
If you'd like to reach us individually, I can be reached at sue@veryspatial.com.
I can be reached at barb@veryspatial.com.
And I can be reached at frank@veryspatial.com.
I'm available, Jesse@veryspatial.com or at kind of spatial in general. If you want to find us at veryspatial.com/contacts.
As always,
We're the folks from Very Spatial.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in a couple weeks.